The time is 2 p.m. This is Business Watch right here on Eswatini TV. My name is Notilesi Tole. Glad to be your host, and many thanks for tuning in. This is your front row seat to news shaping the business climate. Today on the program, we'll hear of how investing in educational technology infrastructure, agricultural research, and leveraging external trade agreements is key to accelerating Eswatini's economic growth. We'll also get to learn from Dr. Emmanuel Lungilehau on the Eswatini Higher Education Council's efforts to bridge an evident skills mismatch. Stick with us, but first, our business news. In our business news this afternoon, investing in educational technology infrastructure, boosting agricultural research and leveraging external trade agreements are some of the key pathways to growing Eswatini's economy. This was highlighted by Ralph Nodo, Project Director at the Africa Directorate Copenhagen Consensus Center during the Unleashing Eswatini's Growth Potential Seminar hosted by Esepa Ketsibanesami Ezulwini.
One key thing, and I take that clearly from the SDG 4, that under Millennium Development Goals, we got our children in school. So more people are in school. But fundamentally, what we are not getting is that not everybody that is in school has improved his or her learning. It doesn't guarantee learning that the mere fact that you go to school. But we can do one great thing. So teaching not only based on your age, using the technology-assisted way of teaching. If we invest in agricultural research and development, where the innovative system research department of Eswatini is supported in terms of research, they understand the climatic conditions very well. They know the seeds that work. They know the produce that work. They will test and do everything.
The Executive Director of SEPAC, Dr. Thabo Sakolo, shared the motivation behind organizing the seminar, stressing
People are here with us. There are so many things that they cry for, but it's not time. Less costly input as well as educational in shorter time, more efficient.
To get an understanding, basically informed by the initiative that is currently implemented by our government, to say we want to see the economy transforming into some higher levels of economic growth. So we understand that in economics we deal with scarcity. We can't do everything, what they call boiling the ocean. So we understand that there is need to prioritize. Then there should be some mechanism that we employ in terms of the prioritization process. So we have partnered with Copenhagen Consensus Center to help us navigate the so-called cost-benefit analysis, which is an approach that informs policy makers in terms of where to invest the limited ilangeni.
Shen, an economist from UNICEF, shared her insights gathered from her work in Eswatini.
The economist that I think first of all, because one thing is that we have seen our GDP growth has increased quite steadily. I think this is a very positive sign, which means that our government, including other partners, we have joined made the progressive efforts. However, that we have also seen some of the other issues are emerging, like for example, that we have not really solved the issue of the poverty rate. So I come from UNICEF. So recently we have concluded a study, particularly led by the MOEPD, so Ministry of Economic Planning, Development and Child Poverty. Like child poverty rate in our Eswatini is still over 46% for multidimensional child poverty. Monetary child poverty is over 60%. So the poverty rate is very high. So this is one of the biggest concerns. The second concern is about inequality rate. So as we know, for example, according to the World Bank data, our country is ranked number 6 of the mostly unequal countries in the world. Of course, including other our neighboring countries like Lesotho, South Africa. So which means that there's still big issues about how to address the inequality issues.
The Eswatini Investment Promotion Authority presented 5 strategic pillars for investment to accelerate economic development, which are manufacturing and agro-processing, agriculture, energy and mining, tourism and education, as well as information, communication and technology. Reporting, Nelson Dlangamandla, Derek Msibi, Ezulwini.
The Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade is on the road to developing a framework that will strengthen collaboration between the private sector, public sector and government, a strategic step to boost trade. This was highlighted by the Director of Small and Medium Enterprises, Mluleki Dlamini, during the advocacy workshop for public and private sector dialogue held at the Royal Villas in Eswatini. The workshop was held under the National Competitiveness Council.
The aim of the meeting is to take stock in terms of how we're going to collaborate with business association in addressing challenges they face as the MSME sector. So these mainly are issues that relate to trade and also issues of formalization, and we want to sit with them today and say, how do we take advantage of the state business relations that is established under the National Competitive Council. So basically, here we'll be discussing all issues and also their representation in the council as well. And we're hoping that with the discussions today, we'll find a solution that can result in a framework of collaborations between all of us, because we see there are quite a number of associations in the country, business associations, and all of them needs government attention.
Leaders from various business organizations have weighed in on the importance of the training. President of the Business Federation of Eswatini, Thulisile Dladla, emphasized that collaboration is crucial for driving economic growth. She noted that working together will help ensure that laws across sectors are informed by a deep understanding of each sector's specific needs rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach.
Ema-economies sibona mhlaba wonke ukuthi kwentekani. We really need to come together nathi as business, and we have to collaborate and talk to each other and also talk to government nanaye, because government, as you know, is the regulator most of the time, and if we don't have engagement, even over-regulated.
This meeting, in my view, it's very important because it's attempting to come up with one voice between the public and the private sector, and it will therefore make it possible for us to come up with one solution, that is advocating for the growth and development and trade, especially of the goods from the country.
We need to find a way to play our role efficiently and effectively. We still need to consolidate our mandate in terms of representing our members and coming into this forum, and also being able to be there collaborating with other business member organizations, speaking in one voice on issues that make the country competitive.
The National Competitive Council, chaired by the Prime Minister, Russell Dlamini, ensures strong private sector representation in decision-making. Other objectives include harmonizing economic reforms across government and business sectors, as well as improve ease of doing business and attract investment, as well as foster export-led growth. Reporting, Nelson Dlangamandla, Derek Msibi, Ezulwini.
We'll move on now to our Enterprise Watch segment. Stick with us because the show goes on.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. And in this part of the program, the issue of skills mismatch continues to take center stage in economic development conversations as it remains a key barrier to growth across sectors. But what is the Eswatini Higher Education Council doing to address this gap? Which skills are most in demand and particularly in which sectors? To shed light on these questions, we now turn to a presentation by Dr. Emmanuel Lungilehao, who is the Senior Quality Assurance Officer at the Council, who will share insights on the current landscape and the way forward.
Now, why do we even have to worry ourselves about skills development? SDGs number 4 and SDG number 8, they do emphasize on the importance of skills development. SDG number 4, which talks about inclusive education for everybody. SDG number 8, which talks about the decent work and economic growth. All these are very important SDGs which encourage the issue of skills development. The Eswatini Education and Training Policy of 2018, as well as the TVET policy of 2022 to 2027, they do emphasize the importance of skills development. The other factor is that, according to ILO, in 2020, Eswatini had one of the highest skills mismatch indices. In addition to that, even the youth unemployment index, which in 2023 was at 48.7%. So these are some of the issues which really show us that we really need to be very proactive in skills development. And then the other part now is having the efforts to align between supply and demand. You'll see as I summarize the different sectors within the country, how the importance of supply and demand is very important. And some of the issues that came out from the National Skills Anticipation Report. And then lastly, we all know that change is needed. Change is necessary. We cannot remain static. We really need to change. Now, why Eswatini needed to conduct that national anticipation study? Basically to address that pressing need, which as a country we need to have that forward-looking skills development mindset. And then the other part is to provide the guidance to Eswatini's efforts to build a dynamic, adaptable, and competitive workforce. And that workforce must be able to meet the evolving demands of the country, not only the country, locally, regionally, and internationally. And the important part of the National Skills Project was that its main objective was to generate and provide statistical information regarding the skills shortage, the surplus, current and present skills. So it's a report which summarizes what the country needs, and also the most important part now is the forecasting model to say, in the coming years, what are the type of skills that we require, and what is the number, the anticipated number that we need for that particular trade. Now coming to ISHEC to say, what is our role in skills development as ISHEC? Because ISHEC is a regulator, our mandate is to regulate higher education within the country. More or less, we want to ensure that the post-secondary education system produces highly knowledgeable workers, capable of stimulating economic growth and development. That's why we are so part and parcel of skills development. Through its regulatory functions, as I mentioned before, that we register institutions, we accredit institutions, we conduct institutional audits, we do monitoring and compliance, all in the purpose to ensure that the skills development does not lose track of its purpose. Furthermore, how do we ensure now how do we ensure that ISHEC really becomes part and parcel of skills development? Normally, to ensure that we enforce and maintain that standard, we normally have standard and guidelines, which is part of our quality assurance mechanism system. So that whatever program that an institution wants to introduce, whatever program that they want to change, we use the standards and guidelines to ensure that they are on track. And normally within these standards and guidelines, there are many processes that we go through. Just to name a few, we normally emphasize on the needs assessments. Needs assessment of the program that you want to offer or the program that you want to revamp. So that need assessment must come from stakeholders, must come from industry. It also involves benchmarking to say the program that you want to offer, is it relevant for the country? Is it relevant even for outside the country? And then we also focus on the curriculum design. So we now go deep into the program to say, what are the methods that you are going to apply to ensure that the skill that you want to enforce or the skill that you want to introduce to the students meets the relevant criteria. So we're looking at teaching and assessment methods. We're looking at the program mission of that institution. We're looking at how you conduct your assessments, how you ensure that the program is relevant. How do you engage with stakeholders to have input in that program so that the skill is not lost. And then also the tracer studies to say once the program, people have graduated, how do you ensure that that skill is still needed out there in industry. And then the two important activities that we normally enforce is the industry partnership. The institutions are encouraged to have partnerships with industries, with companies to ensure that that program meets the industry expectations. Not only for the institutions as well, even as ISHAC, we do have those partnerships to ensure that our standards are within limits. So even just to name a few, we have a partnership with the IVT, which is a TVET sector, to ensure that the skills that the students are going to gain are in line with our standards and guidelines. Furthermore, our strategic plan also emphasizes on the two, which is we only accredit only relevant programs. So a relevant program is one that will address the skills mismatch, the skills gap, the scarce skills, and also the emerging skills. And then also the stakeholder collaboration to say we need that collaboration between those entities to ensure that the skills that's going to be taken out meets the standard. Just to take you through from the study, the different sectors, and also maybe some of the emerging skills, some of the scarce skills that were highlighted from the report. So when we look at the agricultural, forestry, and fishing sector, we find that one of the challenges was the limited professionals at management level. So you'll find that at that management level is people who are expatriates, people who are coming from outside the country, who have that expertise. So you will find that within the sector in Eswatini, there was a lot of over-representation of elementary occupations. So those are occupations which resulted repetition work. So it's a cane cutter, it's someone who's a laborer. So there was an over-representation of those elementary occupations. The study reveals that only 20% of employers are exploring automation. But now with automation, the study revealed that there must be that complement between the automation and the human factor. There are some skills in agriculture which still need that human interaction, that human factor aspect. Then the skills in demand under agriculture, we have the climate smart agriculture, demand, the biotechnology, the value chain management, as well as digital agriculture. Moving on to the other statistics, as we've mentioned before, that over 33.94% was the elementary occupation. And as you can see here, the technical and associate professionals was a very low number for Eswatini context. Now, further moving on to the other demanding and emerging skills in this sector, you will find that there's a need for irrigation designers, there's a need for genetic specialists, there's also a need for dam design engineers. There's also a need for material science within that sector.
Right, we've just heard from Dr. Emmanuel Lungilehau, who is the Senior Quality Assurance Officer at the Eswatini Higher Education Council, sharing insights on some of the economic sectors that hold potential, seeing as the country has an existing skills mismatch. Moving on with the program, we'll have a look now at our market analysis. In this part of the show, our in-house economist, Anele Sibia, joins us via video link. A very good afternoon to you, Sibia. Markets are still reacting very differently to the U.S. tariffs regime, which has also imposed what would call an unsettlement on the dollar. Can we expect a continued weakness of the dollar?
Thank you, Notile, and good afternoon to the viewer. Yes, until and unless we get a clearer direction in terms of what's happening with this trade policy, the dollar is expected to continue weakening across the globe, right? And also once, and if we continue to see more of this onslaught on U.S. institutions coming from the White House, then again that weakens the institutional arrangement and what we should expect of with no U.S. institutions, and therefore resulting in a relatively weaker dollar going forward. So yeah, we should expect that. But markets are responding and reacting, in different ways. When you look into the U.S. markets, for example, today we've seen that the U.S. has somehow rebounded and, recouped all those losses that we saw last week when no tariffs were announced, which include around 30% for South Africa. And I think the maximum is 41%, and President Trump still targets Canada and Mexico quite vigorously. So we're seeing we saw markets selling off, and now when we come into this week, what we're seeing is a bit of a rebound. We know that last week we saw weaker labor market data than expected. So now what that does is it somehow nudges the Federal Reserve Bank to actually cut those interest rates, which is something that President Trump has been calling for, and we've seen President Trump going on Jay Powell very vigorously on that issue. So that's what markets are now doing. And also, with all the uncertainty, earnings season still remains very good, in the US and in Europe. So, markets are now just looking into getting what you can get out of the market. Companies are posting very good earnings. They're surpassing expectations. So we're seeing the Dow Jones Industrial Average gaining some 585 points in today's trade. The Nasdaq Composite gained 400 points in today's trade, and the S&P 500 gained some 91 points to sit on 6,329.94 in terms of all share volumes trades. And then when you move into Europe, what we're seeing there again is a bit of that rebound. But the story there is a bit mixed. In as much as we're seeing the rebound in all markets ending coming back in the green. But what we're seeing is, when you go into Frankfurt, if you look at the DAX, it has gained 169.17 points, but still it has not bought the dip. They've not returned to the levels they were before of that 24,000 something in terms of all trades of all share volumes last week, because of that uncertainty around trade. And it's even worse on France, because we know that, in as much as there is a deal between the European Union and the United States of America, but issues such as your spirits, the wines, and all of those other commodities, they still remain relatively uncertain, and we don't know what the deal is going to be around those. So that's why we're seeing the buyback is not as strong as you'd expect in Germany and in France. But when you look at it in London, you can see that the FTSE 100 has actually gained that 91,067. So, just going back to that stronger region. And also we're expecting the Bank of England to come up and detail its monetary policy this week, its monetary policy stance. And investors are expecting a cut in those interest rates. And then when you move into Asia again is, continuing to impress, because we know that there are deals between Japan and there is a deal between the US and Hong Kong, and also mainland China, and also the stimulus that the mainland China is actually been pumping into the economy, which ranges from the biggest hydro dam projects that they're embarking on right now to those real estate subsidies to ensure that the Chinese economy stays the course, and also hoping that we're going to hit that 5% target of growth even this year. So that's why we're seeing Asia performing relatively well oil, and also going back to those levels that we were at yesterday or last week before the shocking announcement on tariffs. So we're seeing that the Nikkei gains some 258 points, the Hang Seng in Hong Kong is gaining some 169 points, and the Shanghai Composite Index gained some 34.29 points again. South African Stock Exchange, is also just the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is also, showing some signs of recovery, even though we know there is that looming threat of that 30% tariff on South Africa. But the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is back on that 99,000 mark, just some 370 points away from that 100,000 mark again. So we've gained some 322 points in today's trade. So that's actually being driven by the fact that, the uncertainty is good for commodities such as gold, and, the markets are continuing to rally on that, on the fact that we're seeing the gold price improving, and basically the price of minerals is also improving, because we know that President Trump has targeted those with the tariffs, and it bodes well for those markets that are in that sector, those price increases. And also we saw the Reserve Bank of South Africa cut interest rates last week, so the markets are still just getting jumping into that cheap money environment, and we do expect that to drive growth, and hence we're seeing the Johannesburg Stock Exchange showing those levels of growth. But we do anticipate that as that 7-day deadline passes, when we see that 30% tariff come back into effect, we might come back below that 99,000, closer to the 90,000 mark, as markets assess the impacts of, or the full impacts of that tariff. But when you're looking into the Eswatini Stock Exchange, we haven't had any movements. And then when you move into commodities, I will see gold is back on that 3,400 mark, benefiting on that uncertainty that is brought about by those Trump tariffs. And we do expect that it should increase if we don't get an extension of this after the 7 days, when if these tariffs do come into effect after the 7-day passes, so we should see gold climbing back to the 3,450 to 3,500 mark. And then Brent crude oil is somehow losing some value, because has lost in today's trades, because we saw the OPEC plus and OPEC 6 countries meeting and agreeing to increase output there, but we do know the uncertainty causes an issue around the supply, causes issue around the demand of fuel. So that's why we're seeing the price of Brent crude going down, and it should go back to that 65 mark as the weeks go by, and if we don't get any beautiful news coming out showing that economies are growing. And then in terms of the currencies, you can see that the Langeni has weakened relatively against all major currencies. Now that's being driven largely by the 30% tariff, that hangs over South Africa. And if it does go through indeed next week, we should expect to see the Langeni weaken even further. Thank you, Nathan.
Sibia, oil prices fell on at least 2% yesterday. We saw the crude oil trading at least 68.60% per barrel, and today it's at least $65.49 per barrel. How might the uncertainty around OPEC production signals impact global energy markets, especially for countries dependent on oil exports?
That should actually have a profound impact in terms of, those oil outputs, and in terms of, those imports into quite a number of countries. And we do expect that as President Trump continues to stifle out the Russian oil into India and all of those, we should see a bit of an increase or a bit of an nudge up there.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Spear, for that analysis. And this brings us to the end of today's edition of Business Watch. Until next time, take care.
military reoccupation of Gaza. But again, this is another policy shift which would cause an uproar globally and has already caused an uproar domestically in Israel. And it's not being fully announced. It is apparently going to be discussed in a cabinet meeting sometime today. That cabinet meeting has already been twice postponed. But we see the Israeli government talking at the same time about sort of restoring a kind of commercial normality to Gaza, and at the same time occupying it fully and taking over all of